Okay, I think we are going to get started. If everyone can make sure their audio is muted as well. Thank you. So hi and welcome to our event this evening. Just to say this event is being recorded and will be shared publicly, so please turn your video off if you need to. It's so brilliant to know there is so much interest to learn more about space, and hopefully this evening can lead to an ongoing discussion and support network for those interested in bringing light to outer space matters. To do this, we have created a website to share research, projects and support for anyone that would like to get involved. The residency works are also featured, as well as a downloadable booklet if you would like to share the work in person. This is our first residency, and we chose the topic of the environmental implications of outer space exploration as our starting point, as we felt it one of the most pressing areas to shine a light on. We wanted to explore how artistic inquiries can help to give shape to what is often a densely walled and academic area of research. We found matters of space to often feel niche and intimidating, disengaging public interest and consequently enabling only a small and most often privileged few to negate the stories and futures being scripted from the skies. As you will hear more of in this evening's discussions, space exploration affects our politics, societies, technology, cultures, environmental initiatives, and collective futures. We of course wouldn't be here tonight without someone's satellites. So we feel it incredibly important to start discussing these matters with as many people as possible. It has been a privilege and a pure delight during incredibly fluid times to have the residency bring us all together during the past few months with weekly discussions and online meetups. The caliber of thought, care and sensitivities that were brought to these moments from everyone involved has surpassed anything we could have imagined. Thank you to the residency participants who you will be hearing from this evening. And also to everyone else who so generously gave their time and insights which have led us here today. So we will now hear from the 3 residency groups who will discuss their research, works and experiences. While each group discusses their work, please pop your questions, thoughts, links, anything you think to be relevant into the chat box. We will return to these questions and thoughts when everyone has delivered their presentations and have set aside time for an in-depth Q&A session. So thanks again for joining us, and I will now hand over to Bethany, Caitlin, and Julie.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We've collaboratively drafted a script to describe a few of the scenarios we've imagined through the past 6 months of shared thinking and research. To think about our futures in space, we took Nevada as a study site, laden as it is with histories of settler colonialism, experiments in weapons development, spectacular excess, escapism, and waste making. When the term sustainable is a contested concept that can be used with good intentions and or as a means to uphold the status quo, we asked what might a sustainable future of outer space look like as imagined from this place. In this time of lockdown and pandemics, we couldn't travel there ourselves. So we explored through and thought with satellites, looking alternately at Nevada and Mars. We note that Nevada and Mars are the names that some humans have given to these places within a relatively narrow window of time. These places have other names and other meanings to many others. Our scenario is therefore less prescriptive or predictive than simply an extrapolation of a possible future from an extraordinarily narrow but nevertheless dominant set of uses for these places, including sustainable uses. What we present here today is a work in progress. It's part of a larger project. And so with that, we ask you to visualize with us the landscapes, the stories, and the possibilities.
Exterior. Day or night, doesn't matter. Satellites can see in the dark. Unceded territories and traditional homelands of Shoshone, Nuwuvi, Nuwu, Paiute, Kawaiisu, Washoe, also known as the Great Basin, Western Nevada, near border of California, sweeping aerial pans moving north.
Henderson, miles of unfinished luxury condominium complexes from circa 2008. Overgrown Spanish villas, windows blank and black, mustard yellow streetlights uniformly illuminate the complex. The 1988 Pepcon disaster.
Google Data Center, trapezoidal void inside a perimeter drawn by Brad's Toys and Collectibles, Skiwi Rentals, Nevada Pick-A-Part, Lamborghini Las Vegas, and Warm Springs Road. Google's 1.2 billion largest data center to date. It's not searchable on Google Maps, though complete. Public satellite data shows only dirt.
Las Vegas. Whatever it looks like does not matter. What it matters is what you think it feels like.
Las Vegas Paiute Golf Course. Stark contrast at the edge of Oka Desert and gently sloping green topographies. Profit-oriented business of the Tiduni tribe.
Creech Air Force Base. View goes black. Furry glitch. Followed by drone surveillance view onto Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan. 30 pine nut farmers killed.
Ash Meadows Refuge. Glacial blue oasis from artesian waters. An old ocean that dried when California crashed into the continent and made the Sierra Nevadas. Humans lived here for at least 20,000 years. Largest biodiversity of species that do not exist anywhere else on the planet.
Ellis Air Force Range and Test Site Area. Dark, circular depressions discernible where the first atomic test bombs were detonated. Sedan Crater, the large anthropogenic crater on Earth.
Yucca Mountain, striated chevron range where President G.W. Bush approved nuclear waste deep cask storage in 2002, since withdrawn. Bill H.R. 3053, passed in 2019, set out the site as proposed repository for all U.S. nuclear waste.
Clayton Valley, 10,000-acre lithium clay deposit where Tesla just purchased the rights to mine the brine of the ore. Rough, white pillows like elephants' feet.
Walker Lake Testbed. Terrestrial analog used as testbed for Perseverance rover. Searching for microbial life using X-ray lithochemistry and ground-penetrating radar. The dried edges of Walker Lake are studded with stromatolites, collections of fossilized microbes and sediment that have hardened into what often look like bulbous, mound-like growths.
Walker River Reservation, federally recognized land reservation of 2 bands of the Northern Paiute indigenous peoples, including the bands Agaikado and Pakwidokado.
Tesla Gigafactory, Electric Avenue, Sparks, north of the reservation and east of Reno. Aims to be a building with the largest footprint in the world, visible from an impressive distance into the atmosphere. Production of battery cell components.
Apple Data Center, another large footprint across the banks of the Truckee River from Tesla. Sinuous green river body confounds the desert, situated along the so-called California Trail, followed by gold rush settlers into the Sierra Nevadas.
Undisclosed planned site for another 600 million Google data center. With the false choice between weapons ranges, mines, and golf courses, might the kind-hearted oligarchs to whom we have relinquished the right to define our future in outer space look at this green, chemical-soaked landscape etched into the desert and see a kind of peaceful utopia, and in it see the perfect "we come in peace" message to imprint on the landscape of Mars? Extrapolating from the present, we imagine the first use of human engagement with outer space, of terraforming bent to the will of building the first golf course and country club. Golf balls made from special materials adapted to the lower gravity environment will bend Martian physics to the will of the sportsman, their equipment prioritized to launch payloads. Earth's gravity is expensive to escape, but money is no object for the avid golfer. For a game that originated in Wales, it has been stamped across the world as a violently enforced fiction of green escape, but only for those who can buy membership to this ordered and fiercely controlled utopia. Thinking with this, We found reviews for actual golf courses in Nevada and reimagined them written by awe-inspired billionaires golfing on Mars. The reviews that follow required minimal modification.
Standing on the first tee, looking down several hundred feet to the fairway in the valley below only gives a glimpse of what is yet to come. The first question that comes to mind is, how did they ever build the course? The 360-degree vistas of red rock mountains, desert, mesas, steep cliffs, and ravines would more likely be an environment to be explored on the Discovery Channel than the Golf Channel. Ooh.
They
One
really
second.
built this? Was all I could think for the first couple of holes as I marveled at each new twist and turn. Yes, they really did build a golf course in this landscape, and what a rise it is. When money is no object, you can build a course as spectacular as this one. Ribbons of green are draped across desert canyons and hilltops to create something visually amazing. The actual holes aren't a bad design either, making use of the terrain and complementing with plenty of hazards, including plenty of risk-reward holes. You just need to go play there. Stand on the tees and look around and be amazed. Try the shots and embrace something outstanding in this wonderful world of golf.
There's a link in the chat if the video streaming doesn't work for you for the next section.
The city of Henderson, Pepcon disaster. The 1988 Pepcon disaster destroyed half the US storage of rocket fuel in a series of massive explosions. In order to preserve military supply, NASA officials slowed the shuttle launch schedules. Exterior, a marshmallow factory and a rocket fuel plant adjacent to each other in the desert. Ammonium perchlorate is a white powder used for rocket propellant that looks identical to icing sugar, the white powder used for making marshmallows. In the days following the explosion, pallets of marshmallows still smolder from the nearby factory, also destroyed. 3 engineers stand on a hillside looking down on a burning storage facility and a factory a few kilometers away. A black smoke plume is reaching into the sky, and the air smells intensely of ammonia and burnt sugar.
Get the camera.
I've never seen flames as bright as that before.
I hope no one's in there.
There's a lot of it.
Barrels and barrels.
Those flames.
I didn't know sugar could burn so hot.
I've burned myself making caramel before,
Yeah, that shit hurts.
Feels hotter than fire.
and it sticks to your skin.
Look.
Oh, that's everything destroyed.
Can you smell that?
Walker Lake Terrestrial Analog Site. Exterior. A rover makes its way slowly along the edge of a dusty, dried out lake bed, preparing for a future mission on another planet.
Layers upon layers upon layers of cyanobacteria are laid down as doormats on the edge of Walker Lake, welcoming the rover to dust off its feet. Machine meets inorganic microbe. Zap, zap,
Zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap.
Tasting the bulbous rocky growths. Is this life? Waiting, processing. What is dead cannot die. The dead is searching for life. Zap, zap,
Zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap, zap.
Searching. Can machines know? I don't know if this is life yet. I know it is part of life. To see this as life, I have to look closely and the conditions have to be right. To let life happen, I have to be open to not knowing.
Microbial mutiny. A rover sent to Mars to supervise mining operations. It's close enough to the golf course for convenience, but not so close that the noise disturbs the clients on holiday. The rover carries a cargo of lithotropic microbes on board. These microbes were specially chosen due to their insatiable appetite for certain metals. Born of leach heaps, toxic runoffs, and spoils from the ravaged landscapes of extraction on Earth, the microbes' hunger matches the greed of their earthly commanders who sent them to this new planet, charged with the task of chewing this other world into commodities for sale. 2 worlds, 1 beginning. Mars is red with metals, so the plan is for the microbes to get straight to work eating away at the soil. Ideal workers, they never require rest and demand nothing more than iron ore, hydrogen sulfide, and elemental sulfur. This frees the rover that carried them to keep watch, allowing mining engineers on Earth to monitor their progress. There may be some incidental science, if there is time, if it doesn't disrupt production schedules. When the microbe's job is done, they are simply to be killed off in keeping with standard practices on Earth.
Yet when the microbes are released into the new landscape, there is a stronger, more enticing taste, not of metallic elements hidden within rocks, but of perfectly machined and alloyed metal. The rover itself and the mining machinery it joins are made of platinum, palladium, titanium, aluminum, and gold. They are lightly dusted with statically charged Martian dust, the way icing sugar covers a donut, an irresistible treat. Instead of going forth into the Martian frontier of rocks and grit, the microbial miners turn on the rover and begin to digest.
Rover operators on Earth look on first in shock, then in horror, and then in awe, watching the microbes chew through the machinery in full view of itself. Sad selfies of disillusion glitch and recede before all goes static and darkness. Later, the structures enclosing the golf course will meet the same fate. The engineers desperately write code on the fly, telling the rover to move its arms and appendages to shake off the hungry microbes, but with such distance and miscalculations, it is too little too late. A new hunger is unleashed.
The end.
That was incredible. Thank you. And please put any questions for Bethany, Caitlin, and Julie into the chat box, and we will come back to them. I've also, or just share now.
Did the sound not work at all with the video?
Worked for me.
Sound, I think it was 50-50, but we put the link in the chat box as well, so people can go back to it.
Okay, good, thanks.
And I've just posted Bethany Rigby, Caitlin Berrigan, and Dr. Julie Klinger's websites into the chat box too. Thank you. So now we will hear from Genevieve Waller, Lucy Helton, and Dr. Lisa Ruth Rand. If you are ready to begin.
Sure, thank you, Elizabeth. We are going to take a slightly different angle in our presentations today. So I'm going to start by introducing myself and the two artists that I had the privilege of working with over the last few months. My name is Lisa Ruth Rand. I am the Haas Postdoctoral Fellow at the Science History Institute in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is another name for the lands of the Lenni Lenape, whose sovereignty I do want to acknowledge all too briefly given our short time together today. I am a historian of science, technology, and the environment, and in my own work, I use the waste byproducts of the space industry that are commonly known as space junk to trace material and political change both in orbit and on the ground below. So as you might imagine, it's been a real privilege to get to work in this residency with Genevieve Waller and Lucy Helton, who will shortly share the work they produced and refined during this residency. And before I hand it over to them, I just wanted to share what initially drew me to work with these two artists from the outset. I was really drawn to their conceptual engagement with visual media that teased at the binary between material and immaterial, to their transformation of mundane objects, and through those mundane objects, turning them into the mundane into the sacred, both through their choices of subject and narrative, but also through medium, which included use of technologies that may seem obsolete or low value to the casual viewer, but that maintain both historical and contemporary significance. I was also drawn to their interest in the archive, broadly writ, as a source for reimagining environmental and post-terrestrial futures, and their commitment to broadening the understanding of what constitutes a natural environment and environmental risk alike. Over the past few months, I've been fortunate to participate in the conversation as Genevieve and Lucy further developed these ideas to create the work that they are sharing today. And so without further ado, I'd like to hand this space over to Genevieve.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute. I'm Genevieve Waller. I'm an artist based in Denver, Colorado, and I believe Denver is the traditional land of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute tribes. I'm going to share a PowerPoint. But, can you enable my sharing?
That should work now, Genevieve. Is it working?
It's not working. Let's see. Should I don't know, stop my video, and I'm not sure what will make it work.
I'm just try again.
Now it's working. Okay. Right, so I moved to Denver in 2013, and when I did, I became interested in the nuclear history of the American West. And as you all know, on July 16th, 1945, 1 week after the establishment of the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, the first atomic bomb was detonated in the north central portion of the missile range. And the world's second bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was exploded over Hiroshima, Japan on August 6, 1945. And then the third bomb, codenamed Fat Man, devastated the city of Nagasaki days later. So I actually visited the Trinity test site in 2014. It's open to the public 1 day each year, part of the nuclear tourism that happens in the US. And one of the things I learned about was trinitite, which is the image you see on the right. It's the byproduct of a bomb blast. It's sort of a green glass material, and yet it's essentially the waste product. And I became really interested in this, and people collect it. And in fact, I learned just last year, people also have turned it into jewelry, which I really see as this really strange response, sort of a Black humor embrace of the devastation of the bomb and this waste byproduct. And yeah, so I had these ideas in mind when I came to the residency. And talking with Ruth Rand, one of the things she told me about was a whole field of study called discard studies. And I move something here so I can see my screen. I became particularly interested in this because one of the methodologies within discard studies is the aesthetic of camp. So I'm just going to read this quote from the scholar Guy Schaeffer, who explains this. As a mode of thinking through and beyond and before binaries, or perhaps of thinking binaries promiscuously, queer theory is indispensable to the study of disposal. In particular, the merits of camp as a queer mode of reading trash can blur and transgress and cover and glitter those boundaries between waste and not waste that are central analytics in discard studies. While camp is a useful mode of reading for any field of study marked by questionable binaries, it is particularly relevant with regards to waste because camp is all about reevaluation of culture's trash. Camp offers a mode of celebrating, reappropriating, and rendering waste visible without pretending that waste has stopped being waste. And I have the link there if you want to read more. And yeah, one of the examples that Guy Schaeffer actually gives to illustrate this point is a drag performer who is here actually in Denver, who I first encountered at the Denver Pride Fest in 2014, wearing this outfit on the right. It's made of kiddie pools stacked. And so Nuclear Waste is the name of this performer, and I'll read Guy Schaeffer's description of her. Nuclear presents herself as a mutant engendered by the ambient radiation of her post-nuclear hometown, Rocky Mountain Flats, embracing the fallout that has suffused her environment in order to point to the permeation of radiation through her lived environment. Nuclear poses her act as a counterpoint to the work of federal cleanup efforts, which serve to discursively and technologically contain the contamination of the site and return the surrounding environment to its natural state, failing to acknowledge that nuclear cleanup can never be complete. And part of Nuclear Waste's mutant body is that she has 3 breasts. You can see them sort of in the picture on the left. So another really interesting bit of research that Ruth Rand shared with us is the fact that NASA actually tracks this space junk, this debris orbiting the Earth. And I'll just see if I can play this video, a little bit of this. I think it's 2 minutes, so you'll just get a taste. But just the fact that there's of bits of junk, I think Ruth said that at least any piece that's at least 10 centimeters wide. And the fact that there's this sort of junkyard orbiting the Earth really intrigued me. And Ruth's research goes much further into this than I'm going to. but you can yet go to this NASA site and watch this entire animation, and it sort of brings the issue of the junk and the sheer amount of it home to us, I think, to the everyday person in a way we can relate to it. So for my project, sort of in response, I made a series of experiments trying to portray space as personal, decorated, and accessible. So I made fake space junk and I made space junk jewelry, actually. And so in these images, I made photograms using the space junk jewelry. So a photogram is a cameraless photograph. I have one behind me that's historic. It's an image usually made, at least mine are, in the darkroom, where you place objects directly on light-sensitive photographic paper, expose the paper to light, and then develop out the image with photographic chemistry. Usually reverses values, black becomes white, white becomes black, has often the appearance of a silhouette or an X-ray. So in these images, I'm trying to show the kinds of trash I would like to see orbiting the Earth. I also used plastic waste that we associate with ocean pollution. So I used the 6-pack plastic rings for soda cans, and also the milk jug lid rings to make these necklaces and beaded curtains, and imagining them floating in space. Another set of experiments I did involved staging images of someone floating in space alongside the space junk that orbits the Earth. So I had this model holding and embracing the junk, interacting with it as if it was found treasure. But these are photographs where I just painted in the silver space junk, and I painted in the background to make it look like the void and blackness of space. So very much constructed images. And then finally, I used my space junk jewelry and the junk too that I created to stage a fashion shoot. So I had a model wear a silver suit to have that kind of homage to classic space age aesthetics. And I tried to create a narrative of future being sort of hanging out on their own planet, surrounded by their space junk collection and wearing the jewelry that they perhaps created from the space junk that was left there. And yeah, ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to do with these images and all of them is questioning why the junk exists, how we designate it as junk, how we place value, and you know, one human's trash is another man's treasure, right? The definitions get murky, and I wanted to play with those. That's all for me.
That's incredible. Thank you, Genevieve. We'll pass over to Lucy Helton if you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me, and can you see the first slide which has my name on it?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Helton. I'm a visual artist whose work is concerned with the future of the environment. I'm currently living in the UK, and after spending 18 years in Brooklyn, New York. So during guided research, I discovered the extreme environment of deep sea hydrothermal vents. It's still unclear how life on Earth began. The newest theory is life began in hydrothermal vents. These structures at the bottom of the ocean have extreme heat and pressure in and around them. Oops, sorry. Okay, sorry, I can't see my notes because you guys are in the way, but I'll try. As sunlight doesn't reach these depths, there had to be another energy source for early life to form. These vents contain chemicals lending themselves to chemosynthesis, a way for organisms to create their own energy similar to photosynthesis, but use chemicals instead of sunlight to make energy. Interesting. Okay. Microbial and chemical processes such as photosynthesis illustrate the elegant links between the cosmos and life on Earth. Plants sustaining a breathable atmosphere and an abundant food supply are communicating and mediating between the cosmic and the mineral, the sky and the ground, taking up and transforming energy with their processes. In the 19th century, the Romans, known for their excesses, coined the word extremus, which came from the adjective of exter, meaning being on the outside. At the dawn of the 21st century, we knew that the solar system and even Earth contain environmental extremes. The discovery of extreme environments and the organisms that inhabit them has made it more plausible to search for life outside the Earth. NASA astrobiologist Lynn Rothschild, a scientist who studies the origins of life on Earth to better understand where to look for potential life in the universe, sees oxygen-breathing humans as also living in an extreme environment. Quote, "From an objective point of view, oxygen is a challenging environment. We just don't think about it because we're very well adapted to that environment." Using the medium of visual arts, I reveal the relationship between humans and their technologies. My prophetic landscapes address environmental concerns from the viewpoint often of the technology themselves. In 2015, I made this photo book called Transmission, a message from our future to our recent past, printed on antiquated fax machines. I used their native scanners and non-archival paper to emphasize the concepts of the work. Meditations on the future state of the environment and if human colonies will exist outside planet Earth led to a discovery and fascination with basic image transmission using low energy radio waves, the type of technology the Apollo space mission used in 1969 to broadcast mankind's first step on the moon live to terrestrial television. This technology also enables ships to be independent of land-based communication, which may be affected by weather or other events. And it is theorized this is how humans will communicate when living on other planets. The WeFax, more traditionally known as radio fax or weather facsimile, is an analog image mode used for the reception of monochrome weather charts transmitted by dedicated stations. I connect a computer to radio, use specialized software to convert image to sound, place a highly sensitive dipole antenna outside, and transmit across my apartment to a nautical radio fax. And print thermal images that may contain interference either from signals sent by other hams on the band I'm using or from household Wi-Fi, cell phone, Bluetooth, or microwave transmissions. Like most analog fax machines, the information is printed out onto a roll of thermal paper. I've used a new thermal technology that instead of having a chemical reaction to heat, it has a physical one, and the blue top layer collapses into the bottom black layer. This makes the paper more archival and is recyclable. I've begun to layer the paper using it as a mapping tool, which allows the work a more three-dimensional expression. In this work, I'm making a link between the properties of the paper to the environmental conditions of extreme heat. The fax machine stops printing if there's too much black in the image, as it thinks there's something wrong. I restart it again, which causes uneven blocks in the image. With the next artwork I make, I've decided to let the machine dictate the outcome even more and send the same image repeatedly each time it stops, letting go of control even more. So as so few of us have the opportunity to go to outer space, our view and experience of that extreme environment is mediated by technology. as humans use machines to carry out in-depth examinations of the universe, our planet, and ourselves, leads me to experiment with relevant image-making technologies. I see technological innovation as the ultimate expression of humanity, and since each technology teaches us something new about ourselves, my work attempts to map what it is to be human. To make the images, I replaced film in a large format camera with an early scanning technology to reference traversing satellites, which use line scanning to build images of the Earth. This process produces high resolution, non-static images and leaves traces of movement in the image. And since the pandemic, I've used this process to capture projected videos. And to make this panorama, I scanned videos made during scientific explorations of the deep sea. Marine ecologist Enrique Salo describes the hydrothermal vents as an alien environment on Earth. Quote, "These are rare examples of ecosystems living off the energy from the center of the Earth instead of sunlight." Marine biologist and oceanographer Edith Widder states, quote, "We've only explored about 5% of our oceans and there are great discoveries yet to be made. Fantastical creatures representing millions of years of evolution and possibly bioactive compounds that could benefit humans in many ways. In comparison, only a tiny fraction of money has been spent on deep sea exploration compared to space exploration." In visualizing my research, I'm drawing conceptual parallels between our exploration, pollution, and extraction of the extreme environments on Earth and the non-terrestrial and near-Earth environments. Officials believe they can extract and utilize the celestial resources just as we extract and utilize the ocean's resources, in the process destroying many regions and leaving measurable environmental footprints. This printed sculptural object, which seems to have stopped moving, is a fine art example of long-range communication between humans concerning the urgent environmental crisis. Thanks.
Okay, that was truly wonderful. Thank you both for sharing your work with us. I'm sure that the audience is going to have plenty of questions, but I'd like to start us off by reflecting a bit on some of the themes, ideas, and the challenges posed by the pieces that we've just seen. So both Lucy and Genevieve engage with imaginative futures that encompass both familiar and unfamiliar sites and provide glimpses into a future in which the messy and malleable differences between artificial and natural blend into each other. And each artist challenges the deeply contingent contextual systems that shape what counts as valuable and what we dismiss as waste. Both engage with extreme environments, so places that really require technological mediation for humans to access, whether directly or remotely. And their work invites us to ask who shapes these images, who gets to build these extreme worlds through these images, in a way that highlights that human beings still shape the technologies that we use, whether it's a fax machine or a photogram or a satellite, but that non-humans and the non-human also shape the technologies themselves and the stories they enable us to tell. So I see the work of both of these artists as challenging us to rethink the technological gaze and reconsider the politics, practices, and consequences of privileging a particular version of that gaze in the context of extreme environments from deep sea to outer space. So Genevieve's work invites us to consider what outer space might look like should the aspirational accessibility of outer space fully bear out. Beyond even the imagination of hyper-wealthy private industry leaders who envisioned landscapes like that terrifying Martian golf course that the previous group shared with us, which mainly involves gleaming terraformed extraterrestrial landscapes with the streamlined, orderly aesthetics of the space age, absent the wastes that humans generate and discard both by choice and by nature. So the imperative to increase access to outer space has long been an aspirational feature of both space policy and speculative futurism. But the price tag to move to Mars, at least in Elon Musk's calculation, would still limit the trip to a very few wealthy individuals. And as such, an extraterrestrial escape route from a planet reeling through the Anthropocene would be similarly reserved for the biggest contributors to that human-driven global change. In Genevieve's work, we see a potential future in which the excesses of consumption in wealthy societies could easily extend into an outer space environment newly accessible to everyday consumers, not just the hyper-wealthy. Genevieve provides a glimpse at grand narratives built out of mundane objects in which the single-use and low-value plastics that have diffused through global environments and human bodies alike retain their original form, but extend practices of value and discard into the cosmos in altered but really uncannily familiar form. So we see in her experiments a realm of outer space that's reshaped by a different kind of disorder. It's not just the casual discards of late capitalism, but also by an even joyful form of queer excess in the form of camp. Lucy, in turn, invites us to consider the immaterial transmissions and alien landscapes of the places known alternatingly in popular culture as the final and last frontier. Now, like all frontiers in history, both sea and space are historically and currently sites of conquest by powerful states and individuals at the expense of citizens of less powerful areas of the world, and of course, also with consequences for the non-human natural world. Both sea and space constitute transboundary environments that change due to human activity, but also shape that human activity as well. Lucy's choice of the deep sea provides a window into alien landscapes that are closer to home, but still very far away from most of our lived experiences, and that still touch outer space in really important ways, whether through intersecting imaginaries of extraterrestrial life or the disposal of space artifacts into the deep sea following material and orbital decay. The landscapes that Lucy has shown us through her work have moved through various stages of material and immaterial form, which reflect the kinds of decay that take place in orbit in outer space, through the decay of objects, through the decay of orbits, through the disposal of these objects into atmosphere and sea. But the images that she showed us today have transformed from the site of collection originally in the deep sea to transmission through the electromagnetic spectrum, and then back into material form in large-scale print. And in this way, Lucy challenges the boundaries of the terrestrial and the material and suggests new ways to think of how we visualize the extreme, both on Earth and elsewhere. And of course, she also invites us to bear in mind that the images beamed from outer space still bear politics. Even the seemingly objective form of the camera lens and transmission reflect a constructed and inherently human point of view, even as the non-human subjects under examination resist and reshape the images themselves. These large, unfamiliar landscapes, like the ones that Lucy showed us today, which are both material and immaterial at once, represent an amalgam of human and non-human realities that shape and are shaped by the technological gaze in the extreme. So I'd like to conclude there and thank both of these artists for sharing their work with us today. And I look forward to hearing any questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I'm sure, I mean, all the projects are sort of going all over the universe, so there'll be a lot to try and get your head around. But any questions, do pop them in the chat box and we'll come back to them at the end. We'll now hand to Julie Hill, Abigail Hunt, Kieran Reid, and Valerie Olson, if you're ready. Oh, also, I'll just pop everyone's websites and names into the chat box as well. I'm just finishing that off.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm speaking to you from the unceded lands of the Ojibwe and Tongva peoples here in Southern California. And I'm really glad to say that outer space has always been a collaborative space for me and the many colleagues I'm indebted to for inspiration and friendship, and this has continued. It's been a singular honor to work with Julie and Abigail and Kieran across time and space. Perhaps it was the warmth and vibrancy of our nonetheless distant molecularized embodiments that helped us gel around outer space's cosmological paradoxes. Its absent presence, its vital non-livingness, and its past futurity. It made me remember what the word zoom actually means. In our conversations, we zoomed in and out of space as a sensed surround, of sensing space as a signifier for where we were, but also as a place that focuses political aspirations around control. So a catalyst for our first conversations was Deji Bryce Olokotun's novel, Nigerians in Space, a thriller about a Nigerian lunar rock geologist involved in the taking and migration of a moon rock from place to place. The book's mystery is as much about the location of the moon rock itself as it is about why space programs exist or do not exist, despite the commonality of outer space dreams. As Olokotun's work shows, space presents as a hyper-nationalized and hyper-racialized place, in stark contrast to a timeless shared experience of being together in space. Space privileged people are wont to say that outer space has no boundaries, but others whose voices and traditions are silenced or muted teach that spaces felt boundary and felt closeness are not contradictory. In the global geopolitical scene, as Julie Klinger has argued, outer space is overcoded with socio-political blockages to occupation of its trans-terrestrial places. Olokotun calls attention to this in A Story, to the differentiating and often violent power involved in having in one's hands a piece of that space, to own it. It is the notion, though, of sensing space as a forcibly broken from but still connected dimension of human shared materiality and of its essential more than humanness that draws these works together. So I want to turn now to the artists to present their work.
So, hi, I'm Julie Hill. I'm a visual artist based in London. Yeah, so I was drawn to the residency and working with Valerie, and particularly about her ideas about how anthropology might better account for the non-living. And in her book, Into the Extreme, there was a chapter on the solar ecosystem, which focuses on near-Earth objects and asteroids, which I was particularly drawn to, and sort of thinking about how these entities are the looming targets for sort of mineral extraction, but also, you know, theorized as entities which delivered sort of life, bringing ingredients to the earth. And yeah, I was kind of thinking around the tensions between the kind of overlookedness of these objects. And sort of trying to do something which attributed importance and status to them, and through conversations as well about the non-living, was kind of inspired by conversations about how on a molecular chemical level sort of like unites all of existence. Throughout the residency as well, I was also fortunate to be put into touch with Daniel Britt, who's a professor of astronomy and planetary science at the Department of Physics in Central Florida, who works, specializes in asteroids and meteorites and the development of simulants. So he kindly supplied me with some of these simulant materials, which you can see a picture of here, which is of a carbonaceous chondrite asteroid. So through conversations, sort of talking about when you say look at a meteorite, which is a piece of asteroid, about the patternings and why they look the way they do, you know, they're the results of various sort of chemical affinities and sort of how chemicals prefer to be in the vicinity of others, which took me back to some of the conversations we were having with Valerie as well, and this idea of chemical kinship. So my response that I developed for the residency is a visualization for a proposal of an installation. So obviously being in sort of lockdown meant that sort of working on quite large scale installations, which is normally what I do, was not available to me. So I chose to work with the medium of film, and making a model using the simulant material, which I'm going to flip to in a minute, which uses this carbonaceous chondrite asteroid simulant. So the landscape that I'm proposing in the video that's just about to follow is a stage for the unfolding of a series of interventions that cross sculpture, text and performance, that assert the agency of and our chemical kinship with the minor bodies of the solar system, such as asteroids. The work references large-scale earth science experiments, such as the Landscape Evolution Observatory in Arizona, where abiotic soil is rigged up to the multiple scientific sensors for monitoring its chemical composition as it evolves. I was also interested in examples like the NASA Mars Yard, where simulants are used to test scientific instruments, such as rovers, prior to their deployment in outer space environments. Here, however, fictional encounters will be proposed as alternative considerations for space exploration and ways to practice being in good relation to the extraterrestrial non-living. So in the model of the installation I've made, it's made of two-way mirror, which dependent on the viewer's position and focus, they'll be met with layered illusory perspectives. The use of two-way mirror as well is meant to liken to a scientific observation room and has spectral or ghostly qualities, trying to speak to both the objective and subjective positionings and the idea of situated knowledges. Experientially, this aims to open a spectral zone of contact where we can intuit the intervention of this unknown rational order. For instance, one of the planned interventions compromises a live choral work that is performed by the singer Eleanor Westbrook and provides a speculative listening to the asteroid regolith. This was inspired by Elizabeth Povinelli's remarks in Geontologies about the movement of experience of noise into the experience of sense and how we might attune to or come to hear the voice of the non-living. So I'm going to flip to the video now, and I hope that you can hear it, all of you. So yeah. Can you see it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Hope you can. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so the use of analog extraterrestrial surfaces made from earthy materials was also a way to bring in the idea of the play of comparative planetology and how we come to understand the Earth and ourselves through the extraterrestrial. Also, as a second intervention to the installation, or the proposed installation, is a text I worked on partly with Valerie called The Chemical Kinship of Stony Entities, which thinks through the idea of this kinship, focusing on asteroids, moons, and the regoliths. I will just share that screen with you also. If I can find it. Which I can't. So I will, yeah, I'll drop a link to it in the chat because it's available on the Land Art website. So yeah, basically the text centers on the idea of the grain being an individual unit, and which exists in genealogies of ancestry of strata, and sticking and impacting the two principal means of bonding of relations between stony entities. Another aspect of the installation would be that I'd like to open it up to other practitioners. First of all, that would be Abigail and Kieran I've invited to when the installation can happen in real life. So I'll hand over to Abigail and Kieran now.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for sharing your work, and thank you to Valerie for introducing our little group. My name's Abigail Hunt. I'm a visual artist. I make sculpture and collage in the main and have a socially engaged practice. I make work individually, but also in collaboration with Kieran, and I think he can introduce himself. We've been working together since about 2004, we think. We can't quite remember, but around then, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kieran Reid. I'm an artist, a sculptor. I'm also the director of the Slade School of Fine Art. My research is in socially engaged and participation art practices, and I also research disruptive technologies and how they impact on artists, art education, and the creative industries.
So we responded to the discussions by looking at creating a film, which we'll share with you in a little while. But we approached the residency thinking about things that we're interested in anyway, which very much is about a touch and a haptic experience of making. We're both sculptors. We're both interested in the experience of the hand. And we were interested in looking at that in terms of space and the fact that actually when humans experience space, there is always a boundary between them. There's a spacesuit, there's a series of spaces that people have to go through to reach space. They can never touch space, even when things are brought back to Earth. They're very protected. We were very interested in that, and that came out very much in the novel that we were introduced to by Valerie as well. So we've created a film which looks at incidental moments and captures a sense of being human and what makes us human, juxtaposed with ideas of being in space. And it's a almost silent film with text and quotes, quite direct quotes from the novel, from ideas directly discussed between Julie, Valerie and ourselves, that come into the film and capture that experience.
And part of the residency, we really imagined as artists what sort of art we'd make in space, or if we were in space, and the relationship to the Earth, which is in space. And we're imagining that this idea of the things that you would miss, or the sort of works that you wish to make. And it became very much about the natural, the hand, so the touch as well, and that sort of the central sort of materiality of being present. We feel that the film is nostalgic in some ways. It's about us looking, the sense of sight, but also quietness as well. Those incidental moments where you're feeling the heat of the sun on your face, or the smell of water, or those moments when the wind is blowing in your ears when you're slightly deafened. And this is something that we were trying to really think about, particularly in COVID, this sort of this space, and space is something as artists we talk about all the time, whether it's placing a work in space, how it's located, and then talking with scientists about space. This idea of this language, this meta language that we all have, became really exciting for us.
I think one of the ideas that Valerie introduced us to, which kind of really resonated, I think, with Julie as well as us, and felt like an obvious thing really, but the idea that we're already in space, that the Earth is part of space, and we think of it as a separate thing often, that it's somewhere that we're attempting to get to, but actually this idea that we're already there, that we're part of space, was very much in our minds throughout. And
it for us, it took away the idea of the privileged, of this idea of the colonial, or going to investigate, explore, take something from space. That it's an area where only the elite can go to, and so it kind of equalized it in some ways, but it also doesn't stop us recognizing our privilege in that, particularly like within like how space is a term that not everyone fantasizes about, going up to the moon or into space. That it's something which is it's yes, it's there, but it's not thought of by everyone, because there's other more pressing concerns that people are dealing with day to day.
So play the film, I think. It's interesting to think about the fact that for us, the discussions that we had in our group with Julie and with Valerie informed the text that we came up with, which is quite poetical for us. It feels like a poem in a way. So there's questions in there. So the discussion that we had informed the images that we found and the film that we created, but then the images, when we were putting the film together, the images started informing the pattern of how the text came together. So it was quite a journey of those two things coming together. We're just finding and trying to find the film. I mean, you'll see various. Can we not get in?
We can't get in.
Elizabeth, we can't share.
That's
yet.
okay.
Oh, hang on. Oh.
Let me just, I'll redo the settings. Hang on a sec.
No, it's.
Is it working?
Let's have a go. There we go.
So we're not going to show the full film because it's about 11 minutes. We're just going to show you a little section.
Is that working?
It's not start. Yes. Yep.
so that, yeah, that's just a very small section of it. It's about 11 minutes, and the link might be shared on the chat, but it's also obviously on the website.
And just finally to say that the films or the clips we've taken from is nature, industrial, or spaces of working, the museum, the home, tricks of light, and this idea of other living creatures working within habitats as well, and our relationship to animal, or the anthropomorphic, or and how we and that kind of relates to conversations we've had about personhood, or when as well. But thank you.
I'll pass back to Valerie.
Thank you so much, Julie, Abigail, and Kieran. So I'm going to reflect just a little bit and invite some questions, I hope, at the end of these reflections. And in some ways, I see now our project collaboration might be imagined to be about rethinking the boundaries of sustainability as a concept, deeply shaped by outer space's presence as a scientific and technical geopolitical space, where the planetary and the global meet in what Anand Singh refers to as space of friction. So for me, these discussions were really fresh and thought-provoking, and the pieces are as well. Julie Hill's piece extends her previous work on what I perceive as the folding and unfolding of space-time's materiality and immateriality, collecting simulated geological material made on Earth, but meant to be unearthly. She draws us into the spaces between rocks everywhere. She asks us to perceive the kinship and relations of stony entities. Importantly, she does so by making the Aristotelian order's minor geologies and chemistries into major ones: asteroids, rocks, dust, stones. These are the so-called small bodies of the Western cosmos. But in this richly sensed work and in the accompanying manifesto of the chemical kinship of stony entities, these small entities are as present as stars and planets in a chemical society. In her work, we hear the sounds of space that inhere in the particulate and wave modulations of form and scale. Yes, space can be translated into sound, but it's not space per se, but the dance of matter and energy in a near-far spacious relation. In this way, human sound is a rendition of that wave energy. And in relation to this piece, we've imagined how, in imaginative and sustainable terms, life forms exist not above rocks, but as an emanation of stony entities whose ways of being and relating are otherwise. Grains that stick and moving bodies that collide and restratify constitute a history, a society. So I wonder, in a question for Julie, are we also stony entities, wetter perhaps, but nonetheless part of this kinship? And are you also wanting us to have a chance to feel a part in a way that reverses the engines of certain contemporary egoic manifestations of the order of things? So in Kieran and Abigail's work, space is not quite home, but also not totally uncanny. It is part of a condition of spaciousness, which contains the strange juxtaposition of life's separateness and dependence on the combination of the atmospheric and the geological. Moving us through spaces on Earth, Abigail and Kieran convey a sense of outer space, not as exterior to life, but as interior as well, as non-separate from reflexive existence. The hands that touch and wonder and move the stuff of space around them, our hands, are disembodied in order to render the body like rain, like earth, like a bee. Julie remarked in an email conversation about this piece that the hands look alien. Our shared alienness in this film is an appeal maybe to the sense of a shared inalienness at large, to how space's exterior-interior presence creates the paradoxically alien conditions of life in the universe. This work presents sustainability as the recognition of the inseparability of life space and lifeless space, where both share the conditions of the other. And for them, I wonder, once in a while in our conversations, you would mention the perspective of your child, a being of future space who connects already to outer space. And I wonder how this was received by him. And also just how you feel about your work in relation in the context of other works we've seen today. So with a lot of gratitude and thanks for this experience, which I will always treasure, I want to turn it over to Kieran and Abigail and Julie for remarks.
Yeah, I guess in response to your question, Valerie, I think what I was trying to do, trying to think through, is kind of been inspired by some of the panel discussions that Elizabeth has very kindly set up as part of this residency for all of us to share in. And one in particular, we had a lady called Melanie Goodchild, who's founder of Turtle Island Institute, which is an Indigenous teaching lodge. And she was kind of one of the kind of messages that she was kind of talking about was this mindset of connection rather than separation. And I guess through like the works I've read of Valerie's and other people, yeah, just kind of, I guess, like this Western tendency to kind of categorize and compartmentalize and, you know, overlook. So I think, yeah, what I was trying to do was kind of do something which kind of reset the boundary, I suppose. Yeah.
We've had a couple of comments about the disembodied hand as well, and I think that's where it is really made us think about where the hand comes into this. And it is this sort of, I've thought a lot about the point of view of the artist's eyes, the maker's eyes, and also in a collaboration it's not always equal, but then the things that we look at, I'm not thinking about the body, I'm thinking about the sense of touch as well. And so it's how, and it's also how you're making a film as well. Sometimes, particularly in lockdown, you're going to do things on your own, you find something, you go and get your camera, you come back, and that sort of thing as well. And part of the way we work, we do we work with the boys, like where the bees were beautiful, and the bees were like one of the first insects we saw coming out of hibernation, and they were setting up nests. But it was like we went to go to a park, the park was full of people, we didn't want to go to the park anymore, and then we hung out on just like a bit of wasteland,
and then happened to find some bees burrowing, which became such a key part of the film. But had we not have listened to the boys, we probably wouldn't have gone to that wasteland. And then they were interested in the bees, and it started. Yeah, I mean, our eldest has unpicked this film for us and told us bits that he feels should be in it that are not in it, and
also the facts that come through, like where we've got the earth is moving, the moon is moving away from the earth at the same length as your fingernail grows. And these become really human ways of understanding the distance in space. And this is where the science fiction came back into it. It's like when we watch something on TV or in a film, the journey happens like that. And I imagine when we're traveling to places, it's going to take so long, and we're going to be encapsulated in space. And we're not all, unless we're going to be workers the whole time, then it starts making me think about industrial revolutions and free time and this other sort of way of working as well, like this idea of more leisure time. And I don't think it's going to be that. And then the meeting we had with the lawyers talking about the laws which were in space was fascinating, because it starts grounding it in, what does this mean about when it leaves us, when things start developing outside of the laws of the land as well. And it kind of ties in, I suppose, with COVID, with Brexit, and there's other sort of questions now at this moment about how to be human at this moment. Did we answer both questions, Valerie?
Absolutely. Thank you both teams. Thank you so much. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, as you can see from all the presentations, it's been such a fascinating few months and really moving as well. And just on the point of like trying to bring light to these discussions, we really would like this to be ongoing. And we're trying, now that COVID's opening, or things are opening up again, we're going to try and do an in-person event somewhere too, and do exhibitions. Potentially touring exhibitions would be incredible, and try and get as many people as possible involved in democratizing and opening up space for everybody. Please do via the website get in touch with us, get in touch with the artists. I think there's so much to unravel here, and you really need to take time with the work as well. And it's all on the website and on the artist's website. So I've seen some of it pop up now, but do give it time. I will go to the first question we had from Declan Connolly, which was to Julie Klinger, Caitlin Berrigan, and Bethany Rigby. Declan said, I was interested in the narrative choice as outside human, outside partaking observer. There was a level of alienness that informed the narrative for me. Were you opting for this all-knowing stoicism?
I'll jump in, and then I think we'll sort of in our fashion, collaboratively answer this. I think we were experimenting with different perspectives. I mean, we, after a period of, wild exploration, we realized that the defining feature of our thought and experience was the fact that we were very much stuck in place. And so we were thinking, from this place of very fixed mobility in a context of radical inequality of who has the right to move where and under what circumstances, we also thought about the movement and perspectives of machines and microbes. And of course, doing this in the midst of a pandemic, also this provided a way for us to think with microbes as well. And so I wouldn't say we were going so much for anything all-knowing or stoic, as more as we were trying on different perspectives and to see what these questions would look like from these perspectives that we had borrowed.
Yeah, and I guess to add to Julie's leaving on the all-knowingness, that was a primary question that we had, was how can we also claim to know what is there in order to make decisions about it when we have such a long history of thinking that we know where we're going or what we're doing, or having enough information to make decisions that then turn out to be utterly catastrophic for the environment and for peoples. And so we were also questioning the claims of doing things in the name of all of humanity, when, as Elizabeth also the kind of motive for doing this kind of residency is that it's very clear that a kind of democratic governance of space is very tenuous in information and not well distributed in terms of power and politics. So we were also questioning the claims of that all-knowingness to begin with. So hoping that came through in some of our works.
Not sure if Bethany, were you going to add?
Sorry, no, it wouldn't let me unmute. Yeah, I mean, echoing what the other two are saying, I think we were kind of finding just so much joy in coming up with these kind of short stories within this kind of proxy space of Nevada, as our kind of fictional abstract terrain for outer space. And these conversations were so generative, and we didn't want to kind of put anything down almost. So it was a way for us to it was really amazing to be able to produce something collaborative with this time. I think with all the conversations we were having, it felt like we could be doing individual work for a really long time after this. So we kind of took the opportunity to work collaboratively. And I guess we were kind of, well, for me, I was kind of imagining all these new spaces because I had read that we have a sort of crisis of imagination when it comes to outer space, which I totally agree with. I think there's a lot of singular narratives around that in the public realm anyway, that we're kind of fed. And it was kind of very enjoyable to play around with the three concepts of taste, time, and space as well, within what we were writing.
Mentioning your own work as well, Bethany, could you tell us a little bit about your satellite punctures project? Just briefly.
Yes, I can very briefly, yes. So throughout the residency, apologies if I'm a bit slow talking. It's I'm getting tired. So throughout the residency, we were kind of initially talking about satellite technologies and the acceleration of satellite communication and population of orbital debris. So throughout, and I was kind of feeling like I couldn't track that. It felt like a very impossible series of numbers and figures and visualizations of this orbital debris. So I felt like I wanted to try and track it throughout the residency. So I printed off a copy of the Outer Space Treaty and I punctured it for every satellite that went into orbit throughout the last 3 months that we have been talking, and resulted in a sort of slowly disintegrating treaty document. And I kind of felt like I wanted to quantify this overpopulation, and felt that the kind of aesthetic remnants of the Outer Space Treaty that was left is a sort of representation of the slow puncturing of these agreements and treaties by commercial and for-profit space industries. And the resulting kind of effect is almost as if it was hit by a piece of debris. Yeah.
Well done. I think that's.
Ooh. Sorry, I just saw Mariana's. I've got it as an image. I can quickly just scooch out the way of a background. I think it's back to front, but there you go. So yeah, so that's just scanned in, but it's slowly populated with holes throughout the and there's my plant. Sorry. Okay. I've got pictures of it on the document as well. So
thank you, Bethany. I'm going to go to a question for Abigail and Kieran from Dana, which was, I love the texture of the fingertips. What is the significance of the repetition of touch, presence, being in spaces, of being in a space without expectation and being surprised in the encounter? Did you have thoughts on that, Abigail or Kieran?
We were just reading it and debating it.
Touch has been in our, I suppose it's been in our work often, and we've thought about touch as in a sense, and this is not fact, this is like this is some of the things that we talk about. Touch is a sense that we don't necessarily share, because as soon as you're touching something, you're taking that space, and so it's a touch you may sort of sense, and if you hold hands, you're kind of got the mirror of it. So that's something that's always appeared within our work when we've talked about touching or touching material. And often within art, we feel that art is scopic centric, or it might be about sound, but it's about the look, it's something coming into us, and particularly with the like desire objects or how the gallery space works. And so as artists, our relationship with materials and often making is about touch. And often when people aren't artists, they're kind of looking at how works have been made. And so then thinking about this within space or the minerals and materials or the things that come to us, it's kind of like everything is clean. It's microbial sort of, no one wants to infect Mars with bacteria, microbes, and the things coming to Earth as well. And part of the conversations we were having or have been about we started through elements, material coming from outer space and brought life to us. And by not doing that to other planets, we might not be helping life reform somewhere else as well. And so this is where that idea of some of the ideas of touch and the hands came from as well.
I was going to add that I think we have been interested for a long time in the idea of touch being a way that you can learn about something and know something. So when you hold something, you know it differently, and that's been a big part of our work and our conversations. And I think pre-COVID, we were making, certainly when we were collaborating, we were making a lot of work that was about inviting people in to an experience of our work that involved touch. COVID has kind of forced us to rethink that, certainly in lockdown, but also probably post-COVID, we're going to have to think about that as well. So I think, yeah, touch is one of the key concepts and has been for a long time.
and it can be a way that you can learn an object as well, like a satellite learning the planet, like as you rotate around something, or learn as you learn an object or learn a person or something, that it's our relationship, it's one of those senses that helps us think about space as well. And that's and I think for us it's like the hand perhaps illustrates that as well, and that's where you're kind of we were wanting within the film that and so it comes about touch and materiality. The materials are the fur on the bee, the water trickling, the curtain or the fly screen hitting against the wall as well. So this idea of like there's not just the hand touching stuff, there's other materials interacting with each other. Good question though.
Very, and good answer as well, answers. Lucy Helton, there's more of a technical question about the fax printer that you make your work with. Is it old or new technology, and how did you come to work with it?
The machine itself is new. It's but the process, I just had to look this up actually. It's been around since the 1930s, and it was used between the 1930s and the early 1970s. Primary method of sending photographs from remote sites, and is still in use for transmitting weather charts. Sorry, what was the rest of the question?
It was, how did you come to work with it? Was one of them.
Well, discovering the process that the images were sent from the moon to Earth during the Apollo 11 space mission called SSTV, which the fax machine has a radio inside it, and that was used. It was a precursor to the process that was used to send those images from the moon to Earth. And I'd already worked with fax machines. So I started off sending images via SSTV to other ham radio operators long distance, and I asked them to print out the images that I sent them and mail them back to me, and then I recollated those images, and then discovered through that process that there was a fax machine that had a radio in it, and it was using the same technology. So yeah, I returned to making thermal prints.
Incredible, thank you, Lucy. I think a question for Genevieve. Does space junk jewellery weigh more? Are there different ways in which your art is asking for people to think differently about the presence of these valuables, how they weigh on a person as they go about their everyday? Is that something you've thought about? Is your mute stuck?
Yeah, actually, I originally, with the images of the person floating in space with the space junk, I imagined them being weighed down by the junk. I wonder, I was going to share the image that actually inspired me. I can find it here. It's a sculpture by Tony Craig from, let's see if I can find it. Maybe I can't. From, here it is. This image is from, it's a sculpture called Stone Curve from 1972. Sort of performance with the stones on top of the artist, I think. And yeah, so originally I was thinking about the responsibility of the space junk. Whose responsibility is it? And if one way to make it personal was that, yeah, the everyday person is being weighed down by the junk that's out there and that sometimes falls to Earth. And so yeah, I think I did imagine it actually as weighing more because it's sort of the weight of the responsibility, metaphorically. But when it comes to the actual space, you know, and no gravity, yeah, then just like my photograms, which are mostly made with plastic objects that are not at all what most space junk, I think, is. light, tiny bits of plastic. I could be wrong, but yeah, then it's almost like the plastic in the oceans having a presence, but yeah, no weight, and no weight physically, much weight physically, but also weight in terms of importance. It's our junk, it's the things we throw away. And with my photograms, I was trying to make those little plastic objects precious, to find value in them, in their aesthetics, in their kind of personal meanings they can have in our collections, and in the art that we make from them.
Amazing. Thank you, Genevieve. And a question to Julie. And I think this, if you can pop any final questions into the chat box, because they're coming up to 2 hours now. So for Julie, what does it feel like to be in the places you create, to trip over a stone in an extraterrestrial landscape? Is walking there, or does walking there entail a different or transformed sensibility? Dana, these are lovely questions as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the installation is bound by being on Earth, so there's limitations to what I'd be able to kind of create. But yeah, definitely trying to reach towards some of the qualities that through research and that these different objects have. So one of the ideas that I'm interested in pursuing is the kind of magnetism that is so the asteroid simulant that I have is actually quite magnetic. So yeah, I'd quite like to kind of, in the final physical installation, employ magnets somehow, so that you could have this kind of sentient sort of sense of the landscape actually being alive or moving in some way. So yeah, that's something that I've been playing with, but not quite resolved yet. And it's definitely something I'd like to kind of integrate into this one. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And I wonder if any of the residency participants have any questions for each other, because that's the first time we've presented the work all together. I wonder if any came up.
Elizabeth,
Yeah,
it feels, seeing everything together, how there's an awful lot of connections, aren't there? Like whether it is like text on film or the materiality. And I think where the working with the scientists has been really key at some of the debates that have come through. And I can see one of the questions we haven't answered is about this idea about the consumerization or the ethics. And that's been a lot of our conversations, because you think at the same time, whilst on this residency, we have been dealing with Mars, or going to Mars, Elon Musk, Bezos, and this sort of commercialization of space travel, where it used to be run by a state or by a country. And I think that's informed a lot of our decision making. But it's I think this way of thinking about different ways of working, but it's been fascinating to see everyone's work and the different ways that people have made new pieces in relation to shared conversations as well. It's great to see. You can kind of imagine something that we all talked about or listened to in a group a couple of months ago, and it's kind of like seeping through. And it's been fascinating to kind of see today.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it really shows that when people of multiple disciplines come together, there's such incredible results and avenues that you go down. And there is so much to do in outer space, well, not in outer space, but surrounding, protecting outer space and the Earth. So I think the more people that can join in, the better, and just start up a conversation with anyone that you bump into and see what their thoughts are. Because I think the more we engage with it, and the more it can come into the public sphere, the less all of these things will sort of go on behind the scenes quite secretly until it's too much to stop. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. And thank you everyone for sharing all of these works and your thoughts and your time. It has been absolutely incredible. I'm just going to come to a final question from Mariana Trez, who actually supported the residency as well. Thank you, Mariana. A general question for all, but especially to the scientists. How did working with artists change any perspective in your investigations? And to the artists, how did immersing yourselves in science affect your process? So a bit on the spot, but does anyone have any thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. I found it to be just so rich and generative. I'll say just very briefly that it requires a certain kind of courage and discipline to do what is, I think, for lack of a better word, traditionally thought of as scholarly intellectual work, particularly as an academic within a research institution. And it's a different kind of courage. I think artists, and the artists in particular that I had the pleasure to work with, are brave and unrelenting in the questions that they ask and the frontiers and spaces that they probe. And I found myself, every week, often during extraordinarily busy and exhausting weeks full of Zoom meetings where I couldn't stand to look at a screen any longer, I found myself looking forward, like with an appetite, to our discussions and our meetings, mostly on Fridays. And so it has a way of expanding your frame of analysis by being open to the aesthetic, the speculative, and to move away from, I think, what is my style as an educator, which is to be literal and pedagogical, maybe even sometimes pedantic. And so to think outside of that mode has been just extraordinary. Thank you so much also for supporting this.
Thank you, Julie. And Genevieve, did you have your hand up? Or did I miss something?
Yeah, I had a quick question for Julie Klinger and Bethany and Caitlin about Nevada. One thing I recently learned about was the downwinders in Nevada. I wondered if you'd come across them. They're the people who were downwind of the bombs that were tested and basically suffered a lot of health problems because of being downwind. And I was almost imagining them in your project as the plebeians who have to work at the golf course or don't have the glamorous lives in this future Mars for the elite. Maybe just a quick question about Nevada versus Mars and who benefits and what characters you imagined might be in this future Mars.
Caitlin or Bethany, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I could say a little bit. It's really great that you bring up that topic because there's so many different problems with toxicity and nuclear histories that probably dovetail also with your research that have to do with Nevada and California. And I think, we really were, thinking, actually, we sort of stumbled a little bit on it, in part because Julie had done work also around California and Nevada in the past. And then I have also visited there a lot for family reasons and also for just becoming fascinated with this place that is so layered. And yet it's seen as an analog of Mars, and it's presented as a space that that is, that where there is nothing, the terra nullis projection, and also as already destroyed by nuclear contamination. And therefore, because it's destroyed, anything can be done with it because it's not worth anything anymore, or worth only for continued kind of forms of extraction. So in the miniature compilation of our sites at the beginning that we were panning over, it got longer and longer, and and doing this kind of compressed geography, we were really thinking about, we had so many different scenarios to put together. And I think that's also one of the amazing things about working collaboratively with Bethany and Julie is that also the research and the richness of the research could be brought into a different space, and then we could each kind of throw something else that would prompt another person to make another imaginative possibility. And so the ideas that we riffed off of each other were coming from deep places of previous knowledge that we couldn't have, I think, arrived at on our own, or would have been a very different approach. So that's also such an amazing thing about collaborations and frictions that come from these sorts of sites. Thanks for the question.
One quick word on that with the Downwinders. I mean, I'm most familiar with them in some earlier research, that mainly is looking at practices of sort of public or government neglect, what Ruthie Wilson-Gilmore now calls organized abandonment. And there's this whole other script or stream that we didn't share with you today, where we actually consider the supply chains for the special metal alloys for the golf balls that perform optimally under the reduced gravity conditions on Mars, and use that as a way to explore extractive and labor geographies involved in this kind of extension of forms of leisure and violently simplified forms of greenness off Earth.
Yeah, again, I feel like there's 100 questions for that explanation as well. I'm just following through the chat box. I think, Genevieve, someone said, I love the idea that as a future signaling of wealth, someone would fund the retrieval of space junk and display their generosity/wealth by adorning themselves with said junk, which I thought was really interesting. I think if everyone, or if no one else has anything to say right now, we'll leave it there, but hope to pick up the conversation in other ways. And just say thank you to everybody for participating in the residency, for joining us tonight, and for caring about the Earth and each other. To be a bit cheesy, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll sign off now.
Thank you.
And I should say too, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because it's only evening for me in the UK.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming.